All right.
My name is Bob Nadler. I'm the third Resmedian to present today. What I'd like to do is just give. So this, I know this is a Java users group, but what I like to do is give. Let me start the present, I guess. Give me a second here. How come I can't see my screen? Is it still updating?
You're in the, it's presenting here, not there. Is that in PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay.
There.
Got it.
Okay, good. What I wanted to, so let me give you, I'm going to talk about a little bit about functional programming and Clojure and Clojure script. What I want to do is I want to give a little background, I guess. Earlier, over the years, we've all, well, first off, I'm assuming that everybody here knows what functional programming is, at least as opposed to object-oriented programming, number one. But is there anybody here who actually has done functional programming? Like
Pure functional?
pure, well, has used a functional programming language to produce a product? So we got one. So you're the only two?
Scala functional programming?
Not really.
Not really.
Not, it has, so that's, I'll make that point a little bit later. So I've been doing, over the years, it's like I've been reading all these articles about how wonderful functional programming is, and I guess there's a lot of articles that talk about how bad object-oriented programming, programming is. And I decided that I wanted to decide for myself whether it was really something to investigate and to look at in detail. So like, actually the first slide here, or the first article here is actually a pretty good, it's a 6-part series. It's like walking through a tutorial on Clojure itself, and kind of takes you through the fundamentals of how Clojure implements functional programming. The bottom article here, Object-Oriented Programming, the $1 trillion disaster. Obviously, this guy is a serious object-oriented disliker, but he makes a good point. I've read a lot of articles that have the same sentiment, that it doesn't say functional programming will make you a better developer, but trying out functional programming will make you a better developer. And that was really my intent. It's not that I'm gonna like scrap Java and object-oriented programming and become a functional programmer. Understanding functional programming and what the benefits, what the pros and cons are relative to object-oriented programming was really was what I was trying to get after. And so that's how I, so that's how I kind of fell into looking at Clojure and Clojure script. When I first started trying to think about functional programming, I started to look at all there are pure functional programming languages out there, things like Haskell and Erlang, and you could probably name off a few other, Elixir and Elm, and there's all these pure functional programming languages. And as I started looking at them, I found that number one was that I kind of fell into, I started actually looking at list-based functional programming, like Racket and Common Lisp as examples. But then I found Clojure and Clojure script, and I kind of decided that was what I was going to use to investigate functional programming. And obviously for a couple of reasons. One is Clojure is a JVM language. It's like Kotlin or any other JVM language. So if I actually produced something that was useful, I could actually use it in our Java world here at ResMed anyway. But going back to the functional programming, at a high level, functional programming versus object-oriented programming, it's a contentious subject, right? People have very strong opinions going both ways. You talk to the FP people, and they think object-oriented programming is a $1 trillion disaster. You talk to the object-oriented people, and there's a lot of things about functional programming. There's a lot of things about functional programming that make it kind of difficult to understand. At a high level, for me anyway, immutable data and pure functions is the real core of what provides at least the perceived benefits of functional programming, because it's the mutable objects in Java that create bugs, right? So because you can have multiple entities modifying the same object. That's when you run into conflicts. Immutable data and pure functions are a way to get around a lot of those issues. Now, it turns out, I think somebody mentioned before, you can have immutable data and pure functions in non-functional programming languages. JavaScript is a good example. I don't know if you've ever heard of let's see, what's the name of that? It's not coming to me now. There are libraries in JavaScript that there's a state library, for instance, that provides state management for JavaScript that is essentially, implements pure functions. They're called reactors. That are it's done purely with immutable data, and it gets rid of the contention across multiple threading and things like that. So in any case, I'm probably going on too long. So again, we don't want to get into the FP versus OOP battle, but at least I find it to be an interesting source of discussion anyway. So I ended up looking at Clojure and ClojureScript. Real briefly, obviously Clojure and ClojureScript are Lisp-based languages. Lisp is the second oldest computer language in the world after Fortran. It's got a long and sordid history. One of the reasons why it's lasted so long is its simplicity. Like I say here, don't be afraid of the parentheses, because a lot of people are scared off by the syntax. Once you get used to it, it's like looking at any other code, as it turns out. Code as data is a very powerful functional component, because now your data is code, and you can do a lot of very powerful things with macros. For Clojure and ClojureScript, the Repo is a very powerful tool. In particular, the end repo, the network repo, there are plugins for all the major editors that allow you to basically, while you're editing code, you're able to evaluate expressions and sub-expressions directly out of your editor. So, we always talk about being able to run tests quickly. This is like the ultimate in being able to execute code on the fly, get a result, and make modifications. Particularly powerful when you're actually writing tests in particular. Other languages have repos. Ruby has the IRB. Python has Jupyter notebooks, which is like the Uber repo per se. Java 9 now has JShell. Has anybody here tried JShell? Yeah, there we go.
And small talk back in the day.
But the repo in the Clojure environment is a very, very powerful tool. Like I said, Clojure is a JVM language. It's got complete interop, so Clojure can call your Java classes and extend your Java classes. Same way going the other way. Clojure builds to jar files, and you can include them in your Java projects as well. It's got a Maven-like build system and its own open source repo. And actually, when you download things, it goes right into your local Maven repository, like all your other Java stuff does as well. ClojureScript, one of the nice things about the dual functionality there is now you've got a language that you can code both the back end and the front end. The ClojureScript itself, obviously, what it's doing is taking Clojure, compiling it to JavaScript, and even within your ClojureScript class, even within your Clojure script functions, you can just like the Java interrupt, you have complete capability to include your JavaScript libraries as well. So, and then there's wrappers around all the major frameworks as well. So like they've got a package called Reagent, which completely wraps the React functionality. So you can essentially do a complete website all in Clojure script. There's a nice, and for doing both back end and front end, you can actually have shared code between the front end and back end as well. So you can have shared logic. Finally, the community, the Clojure community, I found to be it's active, very active, and very welcoming. I should mention that Clojure is about 10 years old, and it was developed by a guy named Hickey, who is I think of him as the Linus of Clojure. He's literally he's the person who drives the design of the language and is the master of what gets into the functionality. Some of his YouTube videos are really worth watching. He's a super smart guy, and a lot of the issues, for instance, with respect, in terms of analyzing functional programming versus object-oriented programming, there's a lot of good talks that he gives that really give a good ground, a good background on that functionality, on that area. In addition, there's now a San Diego Clojure Meetup, which actually had its inaugural meeting last week, and it's meeting the second Tuesday of the month. So
We're safe.
So it's not the San Diego Clojure community isn't very big. There were, I think, 6 people there for the first meeting, but they had pizza. In any case, I think the takeaway from this is to think about functional programming and give, in the Java world anyway, give Clojure and or Clojure script a shot if you're interested in trying to understand this. It's this, I guess, different paradigm from what we're used to. That's it.